European Union ministers are urged to act after hundreds of migrants are feared dead after their boat capsized in the Mediterranean Sea. How a photography project is empowering young people in Kenya. And is the Force with you? The new Star Wars trailer has many feeling like a kid again. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We'll have those stories in a moment. But first, at least nine United Nations staffers were killed in Somalia Monday when their vehicle was targeted by Al-Shabaab militants. We get more from Nathan Frandino of Reuters.
Of those killed in this latest bomb attack, police say at least 4 worked for the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF. Officials say the target was a UN vehicle in Somalia's semi-autonomous Puntland region. Somali militant group Al-Shabaab is claiming responsibility. The Al-Qaeda-linked group is trying to impose strict Islamic law on the country and overthrow the Western-backed government. Just last week, they attacked a government building in the capital Mogadishu, killing at least 10. Attacks by the group have intensified this year. The UN says it is shocked and appalled by the loss of life in this latest attack.
Well, tragedy in the Mediterranean Sea. Hundreds of people are feared dead after a boat capsized over the weekend off the coast of Libya. Italian authorities are conducting a massive search and rescue operation in the Mediterranean Sea on Monday for the remote possibility of any survivors. At the same time, Italian authorities rescued 98 Syrian migrants whose vessel departed Turkey on the perilous journey to Europe. The Italian patrol ship arrived in Malta today with 24 bodies recovered from the migrant boat that flipped over in the Mediterranean. The officials say the exact death toll from Sunday's shipwreck is uncertain. Italian media says a Bangladeshi survivor who was brought by helicopter to a hospital in Sicily told police there had been 950 passengers on board. 28 survivors of the tragedy were also on board the ship that offloaded the bodies. Meanwhile, European Union foreign and interior ministers are meeting today in Luxembourg to discuss the migration disaster in the Mediterranean.
It requires a comprehensive European-level response to be effective, and that response has got to include targeting the criminals who are managing this traffic in human suffering. We've got to tackle them. We've got to work upstream in the countries from which these people are coming, and we are determined to put an end to this vile trade.
Well, Italy has been adamant that its EU partners have not done enough to help with the migration crisis. Italy has held most of the responsibility for rescuing and sheltering the migrants. If the death toll is confirmed, it would push over 1,500 the number of people who have died so far this year, packed into rickety boats by human traffickers in a bid to reach a better life in Europe. Now, for more on this terrible tragedy, Joel Millman, who is the spokesman of the International Migration Organization, joins us live via Skype from Geneva, Switzerland. Mr. Millman, now, what is the solution to what we are witnessing on the Mediterranean, according to IOM?
Well, obviously the solution is stability in Libya. We think the lack of authority in what has amounted to a failed state is what's contributing probably most to this trafficking right now and this terrible loss of life on the Mediterranean. We must assume that this is the driving factor at this point. That smuggling gangs and criminal organizations are working with impunity, and they're attracting criminals really from the whole region, trying to send their people into Libya because they're secure that there's money to be made in putting people to sea, or at least torturing them until they pay willingly to go onto these boats. We don't think this is a short-term solution, but we know that's the long-term, and so many other things are on the table until then.
Now, what is it that the European Union has been doing, but what more does the EU need to do to make a difference?
Well, I mean, the IOM has been on record saying that some of the efforts of life-saving, first in the Mare Nostrum and now even in the Frontex, which we think is terribly reduced, have been heroic in saving lives. But the the scale of this traffic right now has grown so great that we can't imagine that the kind of short-term ad hoc solution of patrolling the Mediterranean sea lanes is enough. So we are encouraging our friends in Europe and actually throughout the world to be thinking about things like humanitarian visas, broadening resettlement quotas, something called temporary protected status, which allows people to come not as refugees and not as asylum seekers, but as temporary residents of countries in the world, are all appropriate at this time just to avert this tragic loss of life.
Now, tell us briefly, what exactly happens to those who survive and manage to get to Italy?
Well, lots of things happen. I mean, if they come from countries like Somalia, which are considered almost by definition refugees worthy of asylum, they're often processed very quickly into the asylum system. If they are from Syria, for example, which also has a strong argument for refugee status, they tend to head north to where their families are in Germany and Scandinavia and Belgium and Austria. They treat Italy much more as a quick stepping stone. You know, last month I visited one of the reception centers, one of the large ones in Sicily. There were no Syrians there, despite the fact that Syrians are the largest single group coming in on these boats, so they certainly were last year. And others are in between. I mean, some are living in these reception centers for months at a time. Sometimes they can get released during the day to do agricultural work or other things. It's really kind of a grab bag. Occasionally people have been asked to go home. They just get impatient. So there's no hard and fast rule what happens.
Or sad situation. Joel, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks. Call anytime.
Right. Joel Millman is the spokesman of the International Migration Organization, IOM. Well, now to South Africa, which has been swept by disturbing attacks on foreign nationals. Some blame the attacks on a legacy of colonialism, while others say the economy is to blame. And whatever the cause, ordinary South Africans and South African residents from around the world say they are praying for the siege of violence to end. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg.
From Johannesburg's scarred heart, a song of hope and peace. Xenophobic violence has swept the Rainbow Nation, provoking protests and clashes in the cities of Durban and Johannesburg. Hundreds of foreign nationals, most from African nations like Congo, Ethiopia, Malawi, Nigeria, Somalia, and Zimbabwe, have been displaced. Police have arrested hundreds of people, and President Jacob Zuma has appealed to his nation for peace. But on the gritty streets of the diverse Johannesburg neighborhood of Yeoville, life is a struggle for many African immigrants. Adebowale Johnson came from Nigeria a year ago and has been selling shoes on this street corner. He says he experiences discrimination daily.
They use the word, go back to your country. What are you doing here? If your country is good enough, why come in here? So I really don't understand the language. You know, it pains my heart that my fellow black people, treating me that way.
Many, like these Congolese nationals who fled what they say is increasing repression under President Joseph Kabila, say they have nowhere else to go. They say they are disgusted with their adopted home.
I'm leave my country, Kabila looking, they killing me. I'm leave my country, I'm coming here. Now, Zuma looking, they killing me.
We finish on this thing. If it's a soccer things come here, Congo can't play with South Africa. We don't want this relationship because it's useless and nothing.
Religious leaders say prayer won't be enough to fix the issues driving the hateful attacks.
To us, I think it's a hatred. And because of social, economic, of unemployment that is going on in South Africa.
Jacob Mamabolo, an African National Congress official in the Johannesburg area, says his government is working to right wrongs, but they have a big job ahead of them.
To have reversed completely the legacy of colonialism that dates back to more than 300 years. And I think I'm convinced that the spread of xenophobia that we have seen, it's an isolated cases.
He's not the only one who is hopeful. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Well, South Africa's influential Zulu king Goodwill Zwelithini on Monday described recent anti-immigrant attacks as vile, defending himself against claims that previous comments he made about foreigners have influenced, or rather had fueled, the unrest. Zwelithini has been accused of fueling anti-immigrant unrest after local media quoted him saying foreigners should leave South Africa. He said his comments were taken out of context. And meanwhile, South Africa's security minister said on Sunday in Johannesburg that 307 suspects have been arrested for a range of xenophobic-related crimes. The government minister said the full might of the law will be brought to bear on alleged criminals involved in these attacks.
We also want to issue a stern warning to those who lend themselves to acts of public violence. We will find you, and you will be dealt with to the full might of the law. You will be arrested and sentenced accordingly.
Well, the attacks have started in Durban, a port city on South Africa's east coast, but spread to the economic hub of Johannesburg. At least 7 people have been killed in the latest wave of anti-immigrant violence to hit South Africa. Well, now for more perspective, joining us live via phone from Pretoria, South Africa, is Professor Shadrack Gutto. He's the director for the Center for African Renaissance Studies at the University of South Africa. Professor Gutto, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not a director now. I used to be, but I'm a professor at the Institute. Go ahead.
So, Professor Gutto, first, there has been a lot of discussion since this started. The question is, how do you rate the response of the government this time around?
I would say dismal, too little, too late. Mm-hmm. There was really a delay because the violence started even before the Zulu king, Goodwill Zwelithini, made the statement which he made.
Yes.
And when he made the statement, it was like putting fuel into a fire, and it exploded. So I think that we are dealing here with the question of leadership that has been in denial about the phenomena of xenophobia, but slanting towards Afrophobia. I think the clip that was, from your correspondent indicated the countries where the people who are being attacked have come from, and they are all African countries.
Now, Professor.
There are many Europeans, white people, there are many Chinese. Yes.
The question now is, how can you stop this outrage? What can the government do? What should it do?
Well, the government has to come out very strongly, which it's trying to do, but today I think the government missed the opportunity because the king addressed a meeting of traditional leaders and he was just trying to use semantics to avoid responsibility. The president has failed to be able to come out. Today, there was a meeting. Instead of the president talking as a president, he said he's talking as the leader of the ruling party and not the president. So I believe that we need proper leadership that will take responsibility for the country. You can't have a president who ducks and dives and says, I'm now just talking as leader of the ruling party, but not president of the country.
In a few seconds, do you see an end to this at all?
It will simmer down. It will, just as it did in 2008, but it may emerge again because unless we go to the root causes of this, which is partly mental colonialism and spiritual colonialism and so on, where people who are oppressed hate themselves rather than trying to focus on the problem of liberating themselves.
Well, Professor Guto, thank you very much. Professor Guto is a professor and legal expert at the University of South Africa, UNISA. Well, we want to know now what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, empowerment through photography in Kenya. Stay with us.
Every song has a different meaning to each person that hears it and interprets it differently. Border Crossings is unique in that it lets the listeners decide what we're playing. But we bring in guests so that our audience has access to some of the biggest names in pop music today. And we reach out to the audience each and every day in different ways.
Welcome back. American photographer Lana Wang founded the Shoot Back Photography Project in Nairobi, Kenya in 1997. Now, the project continues to inspire, empower, and motivate hundreds of teens from Mathare, one of Africa's largest slums. The youths are taught how to use a camera to tell the stories of the people in their communities through photography. VOA's Paul Ndiho has the story.
The images have captured the single moments in time of family bonds and friendship, work and community, love and survival. They were taken by young photographers who participated in a special Shoot Back project. Lana Wang is the founder Shoot Back Initiative.
The great news is that 18 years on, the project is still ongoing under the auspices of the Mathare Youth Sports Association, and 8 of my original students are now professional photographers and filmmakers.
The project empowers young people to tell their own stories and express their creative voices through photography, writing and critical thinking about the world around them, and this has culminated into the publication of Shoot Back.
Basically, this is a 200-page full-color book filled with writing and photographs taken by my students from Mathare, which is one of the biggest slums in Africa.
Ms. Wang says that her initiative continues to train a new generation of young photographers in Mathare, and that amid all that difficulty, there are great stories of happiness and kids being kids.
The power of this is the true storytelling that came out of this project that was not an outsider's view, but a true insider's perspective on what it's like to live in Mathare, in the Nairobi slums.
Experienced professionals worked closely with the students, providing basic photography training and hands-on instruction both in and out of the classroom. The students were given cameras and told to photograph the communities they live in through their own experiences. Here in Washington, D.C., Shoot Back has collaborated with the local nonprofit Shout Mouse Publishing House for underheard voices to help bring photography and writing programs to at-risk youth.
I'm really happy to be a part of an event that is giving voice to a community that is all too rarely valued or given the chance to be heard. So both through photography and through writing.
4 books have come out of these collaborations. Mark Hecker is the executive director of Rich Incorporated. His company has worked closely with Shoot Back to create a book about Washington, D.C.
We introduce young readers to their ABCs through pictures of our city.
A book featuring the works of Kenyan Shoot Back star photographer Julius Mweru was also on display. Shoot Back plans to hold more photography camps throughout Nairobi's poor neighborhoods in the coming years. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Well, a professional cycling club in South Africa is helping budding cyclists from disadvantaged communities grow their careers. Velokaya has produced 3 of the nation's top black riders who have gone on to represent the country in international cycling circuits. VOA's Caroline Turner tells us more.
Cyclists from the Velokaya Life Cycling Academy take a road trip near Cape Town's Khayelitsha Township. The workout is part of a demanding daily schedule meant to help the aspiring professional cyclist get in shape for local and national events. The Velokaya Life Cycling Academy is a non-profit organization that was started in 2004 with an aim to give children from disadvantaged communities a chance to learn new skills and improve their lives. Many come out after school to take part in practice sessions.
In my community, there's so many kids at my age. They are on drugs, partying, they're not sleeping. So I can say I'm the only one that is sleeping at night. Not partying, no using alcohol. Yeah, so I can say cycling took me away from those things, because yeah, I'm the innocent one in my community, that I can say.
Yeah, I can say that if you're determined to do what you are capable of doing, then there's nothing that can stop you from achieving what you want to do. So I think it's about hard work also, being disciplined, also giving all what you had so that you can be successful in life.
The Academy uses cycling-based programs to involve township youth in team sports. 2 members of the club have gone on to represent South Africa on the international cycling circuit, becoming the first black South Africans to participate in World Tour events. The Academy wants to inspire young riders to grow their talent.
I must be honest, we've seen a difference from back in the days 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. You see a lot of riders now participating at these national events and even the local events. You know, a lot of clubs being formed. So that is a very good positive, because out of those clubs, you never know that you might get a rider who can excel, even if you get 1 or 2. But our main objective is to actually take kids off the street, and just use the bicycle as the tool to promote education.
Velokaya is the only professional black cycling team in South Africa, and it targets children under the ages of 15 to offer them an after-school activity in BMX cycling in a controlled environment. About 1/3 of South Africa's population are under the age of 15. A large percentage of them live in areas affected by poverty and high unemployment.
Because, I mean, mind you, we are taking kids from your little juniors riding tricycles to making them champions. So the professional teams don't do that. What they do is they just make sure that they got the best team that they can get.
The Academy has about 80 active members who participate in the road and BMX cycling programs. Caroline Turner, VOA News.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, Disney breaks the internet with a new Star Wars trailer. We'll be right back.
It is very devastating. It's very sad to hear kind of this news.
We've dealt with it, and we will continue to consolidate peace, security for our citizens and all our visitors.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Here you go, Galaxy. The Force is back.
We're home.
We're 8 months away from the release of the new Star Wars movie, but this latest trailer has fans champing at the bit. Older fans were thrilled to see Han Solo and Chewbacca reunited. And for younger buffs, there is plenty of action and suspense to enjoy. Star Wars: The Force Awakens opens in December 2015. Well, next up, the Sony cyber attack saga continues. Sony Pictures Entertainment objected to the online release by WikiLeaks of a searchable database of more than 30,000 documents that were obtained by hackers in a massive cyber attack last year. The documents included embarrassing communications between Sony executives about Hollywood's biggest stars. The U.S. government has blamed the hack on North Korea after the reclusive nation was angered by the Sony comedy The Interview, which depicted the fictional assassination of leader Kim Jong-un. And finally, it's the latest big box trend in China. This 21-year-old student spends 4 hours most days chatting online with fans who shower her with virtual roses and other presents, which can total hundreds of dollars. She is one of more than 10,000 online hostesses on the internet, the internet site boba.com, a web platform where anyone can record themselves singing, playing piano, dancing, or just chatting. The audience is 90% male. Acting cute is okay. Anything explicitly sexual is not. In total, there are about 50 internet companies in China running video chat services. And that is what is trending today. Well, it's time now for Monday's Sports Report, and here's Sunny Young with the sunny side of sports. Sunny, today, what a big day in Boston.
Big day indeed, Vincent. Sporty greetings once again to our Africa 54 viewers. The world's oldest annual marathon was run for the 119th time on Monday in the eastern U.S. state of Massachusetts. And once again, African athletes celebrated victories in the Boston Marathon. Ethiopia's Lalisa Desisa won his second Boston title in 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 17 seconds. And Kenya's Caroline Rotich won the women's title in 2 hours, 24 minutes, and 55 seconds. The men's and women's champions each received $150,000 in prize money. The defending women's champion, Rita Jeptu of Kenya, did not return to Boston. Athletics Kenya gave her a 2-year ban for a positive drug test. More than 30,000 runners, including about 13,000 women, ran Monday's race on a cool, cloudy day in the Boston area. The Boston Marathon is always held on the third Monday in April, the Patriots' Day holiday in Massachusetts, and fans once again line the course to cheer on the athletes. Boston is different than most other major marathons, as the runners must qualify for the race. I'm VOA Sunny Young, and that's the sunny side of sports. Vincent?
Well, that's it for today. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Here is an idiom that does not sound safe.
Play with fire.
That seems like a bad idea, right?
Hey, did you hear the news about Susan? She has a new boyfriend. I've heard some bad things about him. Do you know him?
Chris, right? Yeah, I know him. I think she's playing with fire by dating him.
And you know what they say, you play with fire, you're going to get burned.
It's pretty easy to understand where this idiom comes from. Children are taught from a young age, if they play with fire, they could get burned. As an idiom, to play with fire means to do something foolish or dangerous that could hurt you. And that's English in a Minute.